The white woman's manicured fingers flicked the crumpled application into the puddle like it was contaminated, then reached for hand sanitizer as if the little black girl standing before her carried something infectious. 10-year-old Tiana Turner watched the paper float in dirty water, her mother's life drowning with it, while somewhere inside the community center, a man who shared her eyes sat behind a judge's table, completely unaware that the daughter he abandoned was about to sing for her survival. Hey everyone, welcome back. Quick favor, if you haven't already, please subscribe and drop a like on this video. Leave a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. Your engagement truly helps grow this channel and allows me to create more content you'll love. Alright, let's get straight into today's story. The morning sun hadn't yet burned through the September fog when Tiana Turner stood outside the Riverside Community Arts Center, clutching a wrinkled $5 bill and a dream that weighed more than her 70-pound frame could carry. Her sneakers, 2 sizes too big, stuffed with newspaper, squeaked against the wet pavement as she shifted her weight from foot to foot, rehearsing words she'd practiced in the mirror of their Section 8 apartment bathroom for 3 weeks straight. Good morning, ma'am. My name is Tiana Turner, and I'd like to register for the talent show. Simple. Polite. Mama always said politeness could open doors that looked permanently locked. But Tiana had learned, in her 10 years of life, that some doors stayed shut no matter how sweetly you knocked. The registration table sat just inside the community center's glass doors, manned by a woman whose blonde hair was sprayed into submission and whose cream-colored pantsuit probably cost more than 3 months of Mama's disability checks. A gold nameplate on the table read, Victoria Mitchell, Arts Council Coordinator. Victoria's lips were pursed in concentration as she sorted through a stack of applications, occasionally glancing at her phone where Tiana could see the reflection of a beautifully dressed teenage girl, probably her daughter, practicing what looked like a dance routine. Tiana took a breath that rattled in her chest and pushed through the doors. The air conditioning hit her like a wall of ice, raising goosebumps on her bare arms. Her t-shirt, a faded purple thing from the Goodwill that said, Future Star, in cracked gold letters, suddenly felt threadbare and obvious. Around her, other kids milled about with their parents, their clothes crisp and name-brand, their laughter easy and entitled. A boy about her age wore a designer tracksuit Tiana recognized from a billboard on the bus route. A girl with perfect braids carried what looked like a professional microphone case. Tiana's hand tightened around her $5 bill, made up of quarters, dimes, and nickels she'd earned selling lemonade every day after school for 8 months. 8 months of, no, thank you, and, not today, sweetie, and sometimes just people walking past her card table like she was invisible. But she'd done it. $5. The registration fee that stood between her and $50,000. Between her mama and death. She approached the table, her heart hammering so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. Excuse me, ma'am. Victoria Mitchell looked up, and something flickered across her face, something Tiana had seen before in grocery store clerks and teachers and bus drivers. A subtle tightening around the eyes. A barely perceptible shift backward. Yes. Victoria's voice was clipped, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as they traveled from Tiana's face down to her 2 big sneakers and back up again. My name is Tiana Turner, and I'd like to register for the talent show, please. Tiana placed the $5 bill on the table, smoothing out the wrinkles with trembling fingers. I have the registration fee. Victoria stared at the crumpled bill like Tiana had placed a dead rat on her pristine white tablecloth. She didn't touch it. Didn't even lean closer to look at the application form Tiana had filled out in her neatest handwriting, every letter carefully formed because Mama said first impressions mattered. The registration deadline was last week, Victoria said, though Tiana could see a sign behind her that clearly stated, registration open until 10 a.m. today. The flyer said. I know what the flyer said. Victoria's smile had vanished entirely. But we're at capacity. The show is for serious performers. Children with training. Professional coaching. Her eyes did that scan again, taking in Tiana's worn clothes, her uneven haircut that Mama had done in their kitchen because salon visits were a luxury they couldn't afford. This isn't appropriate for someone like you. Someone like you. The words hung in the air like smoke, their meaning clear even if Victoria was too cowardly to say what she really meant. Tiana felt heat rising in her cheeks, but she'd prepared for this too. Mama had taught her to always have a backup plan, to fight with facts when people tried to shut you down with feelings. I can sing, ma'am. I've been practicing for months. I have videos. Videos? Victoria actually laughed, a sharp sound that made other people at nearby tables turn to look. Sweetheart, do you know how many children think they can sing because they record themselves on their phones? This is a juried competition. We have scouts from record labels attending. A&R executives. This isn't a school talent show where everyone gets a participation trophy. I know. Tiana's voice came out smaller than she intended, but she pushed forward. That's why I'm here. I need. You need? Victoria leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more violent than shouting. Let me tell you what I need. I need performers who won't embarrass this organization. I need children whose parents can afford to dress them appropriately, who've had vocal training, who understand that this is a serious artistic endeavor, not a charity case looking for handouts. The words hit like slaps. Tiana felt her eyes burning, but she blinked hard. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of this woman who looked at her like she was trash to be swept away. My mama is sick, Tiana said, her voice shaking but audible. She has cancer. Stage 4. The doctors said she needs surgery, but our insurance won't cover it. It costs $50,000. The same as the prize money. So Oh, for God's sake. Victoria stood abruptly, snatching Tiana's application from the table where she'd never actually accepted it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Using sob stories to manipulate judges. Creating uncomfortable situations. She looked around as if appealing to an invisible audience. Every child here has practiced. They've earned their spot. They don't need some. She stopped herself, but Tiana heard the word anyway, hanging in the silence like a noose. Victoria crumpled the application in her fist and walked toward the door. Tiana followed, desperation overriding humiliation. Please, Tiana said, and she hated how the word sounded. Begging. Like Mama said she should never have to do. Please, I just need a chance. Just let me audition. If I'm not good enough, I'll leave. But please. They were outside now, on the wet steps of the community center. Other families streamed past them, children clutching instrument cases and good luck cards, parents offering encouraging smiles that died when they saw the scene unfolding. Victoria looked at Tiana with something close to disgust. Then she flicked her wrist, sending the crumpled application sailing through the air. It landed in a puddle at the bottom of the steps, the ink immediately beginning to run, Tiana's carefully written name dissolving into blue streaks. No, Victoria said simply. Then she pulled a small bottle of hand sanitizer from her pocket and squeezed a generous amount into her palm, rubbing her hands together as if washing away contamination. As if Tiana's poverty, her blackness, her desperation was something that could be caught like a disease. Tiana stood frozen, watching the woman walk back inside, the glass doors closing with a definitive click. Through the windows, she could see Victoria returning to her table, smoothing her pantsuit, smiling at a white family as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just crushed a child's last hope in the space of 5 minutes. The $5 bill still sat on the table, forgotten or rejected. Tiana didn't know which was worse. She walked down the steps on numb legs and picked her application out of the puddle. The paper fell apart in her hands, pieces of it floating away in the oily water. 8 months of lemonade stands. 3 weeks of rehearsing her introduction. 11 years of living without a father who'd promised to love her mama forever, then disappeared the moment things got hard. Tiana stood there, holding pieces of wet paper, and thought about mama lying in their apartment, too weak to walk to the bathroom without help. Thought about the surgery that could save her life, scheduled for 6 weeks from now, with no way to pay for it. Thought about the doctor who'd said, gently but clearly, that without the surgery, Mama had maybe 3 months. 3 months. 90 days to say goodbye to the only person who'd ever chosen to stay. And somewhere inside that building, behind those glass doors, a man named Christopher Hayes was settling into a judge's chair, adjusting his expensive suit, accepting a bottle of water from a production assistant. A successful A&R executive invited as a guest judge to lend credibility to this small community talent show. A man who'd built a career discovering talent, giving chances to unknown singers, launching careers with a signature and a smile. A man who had no idea that the little girl he'd abandoned 10 years ago, the baby he'd left crying in a Section 8 apartment while her mama sobbed, had just been turned away at the door. Tiana looked at the soggy pieces of paper in her hands, then at the community center where laughter and music drifted through the walls. She thought about what Mama always said when things got hard, sometimes the world tells you no so you can learn to make your own yes. She didn't know how yet. But standing there in the morning fog, her shoes full of newspaper and her heart full of fury, Tiana Turner made a promise to herself and to her mama and to the father who'd never deserved either of them. She would sing. One way or another, she would be heard. And when she won, not if, but when, everyone who'd ever looked at her like Victoria Mitchell just had would know they'd made a mistake. Especially the man behind the judge's table who'd already made the biggest mistake of his life. He just didn't know it yet. 3 weeks earlier, Tiana had been sitting in the stairwell of St. Mary's Hospital, where Mama went twice a week for chemotherapy treatments that left her too sick to move. The stairwell was Tiana's sanctuary, concrete and echo and a kind of loneliness that felt honest. She'd discovered that if she sang there between the 4th and 5th floors, the acoustics made her voice sound bigger, richer, like it belonged to someone who mattered. She'd been working on Rise Up by Andra Day, a song she'd found on YouTube while searching for powerful songs about not giving up. The lyrics felt like they'd been written specifically for her and Mama, about getting knocked down and standing back up, about lifting each other when the world got too heavy. I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day, I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. Her voice had bounced off the walls, and she'd closed her eyes, imagining an audience. Imagining Mama healthy and smiling in the front row. Imagining a life where they weren't always one emergency away from losing everything. When she'd opened her eyes, a janitor had been standing on the landing below, his mop forgotten in his bucket. "Girl," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion, "you got something special." That voice, he'd shaken his head. "That's a gift from God himself." Tiana had felt embarrassed and proud all at once. "Thank you. You taking lessons somewhere? Training with somebody?" "No, sir. Just YouTube. And I practice here sometimes, when Mama's getting her treatment." The janitor, his name tag said, James, had studied her for a long moment. "Your Mama the one with the pretty smile? 4th floor oncology." Tiana had nodded, suddenly afraid she was in trouble for using the stairwell. But James had just smiled sadly. "She talks about you all the time. Says you're gonna be somebody important one day." He'd paused. "You keep singing, baby girl. Don't let nobody tell you that voice ain't meant to be heard." That same afternoon, Tiana had stopped at the hospital's community board while waiting for Mama's treatment to finish. Among the flyers for support groups and medication assistance programs, one had caught her eye. Riverside Community Talent Show Grand Prize, $50,000 all ages welcome registration fee, $5 September 28 at the Riverside Community Arts Center. $50,000. The exact amount the surgeon had quoted for Mama's operation. The exact amount their insurance company had denied, claiming the procedure was experimental, despite 3 oncologists saying it was Mama's only chance. Tiana had taken a photo of the flyer with the cracked screen phone Mama had gotten her for emergencies. That night, while Mama slept fitfully in their bedroom, Tiana had researched everything she could about talent shows. She'd watched videos of past competitions, studied what judges looked for, analyzed what made performers stand out. And she'd made a plan. For 8 months before that, she'd been running a lemonade stand every day after school, saving money for Mama's birthday present. She'd accumulated $4.63. She'd needed 37 more cents to afford the registration fee, so she'd started looking in couch cushions, sidewalk cracks, anywhere coins might hide. It had taken another week, but she'd done it. $5. Her ticket to saving Mama's life. She'd filled out the registration form with painstaking care, listing her talent as vocal performance and her song choice as Rise Up. Under the question, "Why do you want to participate?" she'd written simply, "To save my mother's life." She'd practiced her introduction 50 times. She'd ironed her best shirt, the purple Future Star one, even though the iron was old and left a small brown mark she tried to hide by tucking it in. She'd watched videos on how to stand, how to project confidence, how to connect with an audience. She'd done everything right. And Victoria Mitchell had thrown her application into a puddle like garbage. Now, standing outside the community center with soggy paper in her hands and rage burning in her chest, Tiana made a decision. She walked back up the steps, pushed through the glass doors, and headed straight past Victoria's table toward the auditorium where she could hear sound checks echoing. "Excuse me." Victoria's voice was sharp behind her. "You can't go back there. Security." But Tiana was small and fast, and she knew how to make herself invisible when she needed to. She'd spent years navigating welfare offices and hospital corridors and Section 8 housing complexes where people barely noticed children unless they were making noise. She slipped through a side door marked, "Performers Only," before anyone could stop her. The backstage area was chaos, kids warming up, parents adjusting costumes, production crew running cables and testing microphones. Tiana found a dark corner behind a stack of equipment cases and made herself small, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack a rib. She could hear Victoria's voice in the hallway, angry and insistent, "There's an unauthorized child backstage. Find her and remove her immediately." Tiana pressed herself deeper into the shadows and did something she hadn't done in years. She prayed. Not to the God Mama believed in, who supposedly had a plan for everything, because what kind of plan involved a good woman dying while her 10-year-old daughter begged strangers for help? No, Tiana prayed to something more abstract. To the universe. To fate. To whatever force decided who got to be heard and who got silenced. "Please," she thought. "Just give me one chance. Just let me sing. That's all I'm asking. One chance to save her." A production assistant rushed past her hiding spot, speaking urgently into a headset, "We're starting preliminary rounds in 5 minutes. Is the judging panel ready?" Through a gap in the curtains, Tiana could see 3 people taking their seats at the judge's table. Victoria Mitchell sat on the left, her face still tight with anger. An elderly man Tiana didn't recognize sat in the middle. And on the right, adjusting his designer glasses and accepting a bottle of water from a staff member, sat a man in an expensive charcoal suit. Even from this distance, even in the dim backstage lighting, Tiana could see something familiar in the shape of his face. The angle of his jaw. The way he held himself, like someone who'd never been told no in his life. Christopher Hayes. A&R executive. Guest judge. Her father. The man who'd promised Mama forever, then walked away when forever got complicated. Who'd sent exactly 3 child support checks in 11 years, each one smaller than the last. Who'd changed his phone number, moved to a different city, built a whole new life as if Tiana and Mama had been nothing more than a youthful mistake to be erased. Tiana stared at him, this stranger who shared her DNA, and felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. Victoria Mitchell had tried to keep her out because of racism and classism and pure cruelty. But Christopher Hayes had abandoned her for something even simpler, cowardice. What would you do if the person who abandoned you suddenly held the power to change your life? Would you want revenge, redemption, or just to be seen? Drop your thoughts below, I want to hear your take. The stage manager's voice crackled through the backstage speakers. First performer to staging, please. We're beginning preliminaries in 3 minutes. Tiana took a breath that tasted like fear and fury in equal measure. She didn't have a registered number. She didn't have permission to be here. She didn't even have a complete application anymore. But she had a voice. And sometimes, as Mama always said, that was the only weapon you needed. She stood up from her hiding place and walked toward the stage entrance, her 2 big shoes squeaking against the floor, her heart beating a rhythm that sounded like her mother's name. Christopher Hayes checked his phone one more time, completely unaware that his past was about to step into the spotlight and demand he finally pay attention. The first 3 performers were exactly what Victoria Mitchell wanted: polished, coached, and utterly forgettable. A 13-year-old boy in a tuxedo played a technically perfect but soulless piano piece. Twin girls in matching sequin dresses sang a harmony so rehearsed it sounded robotic. A teenager with an acoustic guitar performed an original song about summer love that made Christopher Hayes check his watch twice. Tiana watched from the wings, her stomach churning with a mixture of terror and determination. She'd made it this far by staying invisible, blending into the chaos of backstage crew and performers. Security had swept through twice looking for the unauthorized child, but Tiana had learned long ago how to make adults look right past her. Being poor and black meant you were either hypervisible, suspicious, threatening, out of place, or completely invisible. Today, she chose invisible. The stage manager, a tired-looking woman with a clipboard and a headset, was calling numbers. Performer 17 to staging. Performer 18 on deck. Tiana didn't have a number. She had nothing but the clothes on her back and a song in her throat that felt like it might explode if she didn't let it out soon. On stage, performer 16, a boy doing a magic act that was going poorly, fumbled his final trick. The audience offered polite applause. Victoria Mitchell marked something on her scorecard with what looked like satisfaction. The elderly judge in the middle seemed half asleep. And Christopher Hayes maintained the carefully neutral expression of someone who'd sat through 1,000 mediocre auditions. Performer 17, the stage manager called again, more urgently this time. Madison Mitchell to staging. A girl swept past Tiana's hiding spot, all confidence and blonde highlights. Madison Mitchell, Victoria's daughter, clearly. She wore a designer outfit that probably cost more than Mama's monthly disability check, carried herself like someone who'd never been told she couldn't have something. Behind her, Victoria stood and hurried toward the wings, catching her daughter's hand. "You're going to be perfect, baby," Victoria whispered, but her voice carried in the backstage quiet. "Just like we practiced. Remember, smile at the judges, especially Mr. Hayes. He's the one with real industry connections." Madison nodded, her face set in determination that looked more calculated than passionate. Tiana watched them, mother and daughter, and felt an ache so deep it threatened to swallow her whole. When was the last time Mama had been strong enough to walk her anywhere? When was the last time Mama had been able to whisper encouragement before Tiana faced something scary? 3 months ago, maybe. Before the cancer had spread to her bones. Before the pain had gotten so bad that Mama cried when she thought Tiana was asleep. Madison Mitchell walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause. Victoria had clearly packed the audience with supporters. She launched into a pop song, her voice adequate but unremarkable, her performance more about choreography and costume changes than actual emotion. Christopher Hayes leaned forward slightly, paying more attention than he had to previous performers. Victoria beamed from the wings, already calculating her daughter's victory. The song ended. The audience applauded. Madison took an elaborate bow. "Thank you, Madison," the elderly judge said. "That was very energetic." Victoria's score went up immediately, a 9 out of 10. The elderly judge gave a 7. Christopher Hayes paused, pen hovering over his scorecard, then wrote an 8. Madison walked off stage glowing, and Victoria embraced her like she'd just won a Grammy. "Perfect, baby. Absolutely perfect. Performer 18 to staging, the stage manager called. She checked her clipboard, frowning. Performer 18. Do we have an 18? Silence. Tiana's heart hammered. This was it. The moment where she either stayed hidden and safe, or stepped into the light and risked everything. She thought about Mama, probably asleep right now in their apartment, her body ravaged by disease and poverty and a healthcare system that valued profit over lives. Thought about the surgery scheduled for 6 weeks from now that they couldn't afford. Thought about the GoFundMe page that had raised $300 in 8 months because people were tired of being asked to fund what insurance should cover. Thought about her father sitting 20 feet away, living a life of expensive suits and industry connections while his daughter wore shoes stuffed with newspaper. Tiana Turner stepped out of the shadows. I'm here, she said, her voice small but clear. I'd like to audition. The stage manager spun around, relief and confusion crossing her face simultaneously. What's your number? I don't have one. I registered this morning, but there was confusion. About my paperwork. From the wings, Victoria's voice cut through the air like a knife. She is not registered. She has no business being backstage. Security. The stage manager looked between Tiana and Victoria, clearly weighing protocol against the tight schedule. I don't have you on my list. Please. Tiana stepped forward, and something in her face must have registered because the stage manager hesitated. I came here to sing. I have a song ready. I won't take more than 3 minutes of anyone's time. This is completely inappropriate. Victoria was rushing toward them now, her face flushed with anger. This child was explicitly denied entry. She's trespassing. I want her removed immediately. From the judge's table, Christopher Hayes's voice carried through the auditorium. Is there a problem? The stage manager looked toward the judges, then at Tiana, then at Victoria whose face had gone from flushed to nearly purple. Sir, there's an unregistered performer who. Then register her. Christopher's voice was bored, like he couldn't be bothered with backstage drama. We're already running behind schedule. If she wants to audition, let her audition. What's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? Tiana felt something sharp and bitter rise in her throat. Her father was about to find out. Victoria looked like she might argue, but challenging a guest judge, especially one with Christopher Hayes's industry reputation, would be a bad look. She stepped back, her expression promising future retribution. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. Let her humiliate herself. The stage manager sighed and made a note on her clipboard. Name. Tiana Turner. Age. 10. Song choice. Tiana took a breath. Rise Up. By Andra Day. The stage manager's eyebrows rose slightly. It was an ambitious choice, but she just nodded and spoke into her headset. We have one more preliminary. Tiana Turner, unscheduled audition. She gestured toward the stage entrance. You're up, kid. Make it count. Tiana walked toward the lights, her 2 big shoes squeaking with every step, her heart beating so loud she was certain the microphone would pick it up. She stepped onto the stage, and the lights hit her like a physical force, blinding and exposing all at once. In the front row, she could see a few scattered audience members. Most seats were empty, preliminaries weren't well attended. But at the judges' table, 3 people sat with scorecards and pens. Victoria Mitchell, radiating hostility. The elderly judge, now fully awake and watching with mild interest. And Christopher Hayes, looking up from his phone for the first time, his eyes landing on Tiana. For just a second, less than a heartbeat, something flickered across his face. Recognition. Confusion. But then it was gone, replaced by professional neutrality. He didn't know her. 11 years of absence had erased whatever memory he might have had of the baby daughter he'd left behind. But Tiana knew him. And she was about to make sure he never forgot her again. The music started, and Tiana closed her eyes, found the place in her chest where all the pain and fear and fury lived, and opened her mouth to sing. The first note came out shaky, thin in the vast auditorium space. Tiana felt panic flutter in her chest. This wasn't a hospital stairwell with its friendly acoustics. This was exposure, vulnerability, judgment rendered under harsh lights by people who'd already decided she didn't belong. But then she thought of Mama's face the day the insurance denial letter arrived. How Mama had read it 3 times, each time slower, as if reading carefully enough might change the words. How she'd finally folded the letter precisely, placed it on the kitchen table, and said in a voice made of broken glass, "Well, baby girl, I guess we'll just have to pray for a miracle." Tiana didn't believe in miracles. But she believed in her voice. The second note came stronger. And the third. And by the time she reached the chorus, something inside her broke open and the song poured out like it had been waiting her whole life for this moment. I'll rise like the day, I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. She wasn't singing for the judges anymore. She was singing for Mama, lying in bed too weak to stand. For every time a social worker had looked at their apartment with barely concealed pity. For every teacher who'd assumed she couldn't read well because her clothes came from Goodwill. For every person who'd ever looked at her like Victoria Mitchell had, like she was something to be scraped off the bottom of a shoe. In the stairwell at St. Mary's Hospital, Tiana had learned that pain could be transformed into power if you knew how to channel it. Every chemo treatment she'd watched Mama endure. Every night she'd fallen asleep to the sound of her mother crying in the bathroom. Every morning she'd woken up and made breakfast and gotten herself to school because Mama was too sick to do it anymore. All of it lived in her voice now, raw and honest and impossible to ignore. The sparse audience had gone completely silent. A few people who'd been checking their phones looked up. Someone in the back row stood, though Tiana couldn't see them through the lights. At the judge's table, the elderly man had set down his pen entirely, his mouth slightly open. Victoria Mitchell sat rigid, her scorecard untouched, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. And Christopher Hayes. Christopher Hayes was staring at Tiana like he'd seen a ghost. His hand had moved to his mouth, fingers pressed against his lips as if holding back words or maybe vomit. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and even from the stage Tiana could see they'd gone glossy with moisture. His other hand gripped the edge of the judge's table so hard his knuckles had gone white. Something was happening to him. Some kind of recognition or realization that Tiana couldn't fully understand but could feel radiating from him in waves. She pushed into the final chorus, her voice climbing higher, stronger, filling every corner of the auditorium with a decade of abandonment and anger and desperate, furious hope. And I'll rise up, rise like the day, I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. The song built to its climax, and Tiana let everything go, every ounce of fear about Mama dying, every moment of shame about being poor, every second of rage at her father for leaving them to drown while he built his successful life elsewhere. Her voice cracked on the final note, but it was the kind of crack that sounded like truth, like a heart breaking open for everyone to witness. The last note hung in the air for a moment that felt suspended in time. Then the auditorium exploded. The elderly judge shot to his feet, clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. The scattered audience members were standing, shouting encouragement. The production crew backstage had stopped working entirely to listen, and now they were applauding too. Even some of the other young performers, competitors who should have been hoping she'd fail, were cheering. But Tiana only had eyes for one person. Christopher Hayes sat frozen in his chair, tears streaming openly down his face now, his body shaking like he was coming apart at the seams. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't moving. He was just staring at Tiana with an expression of such profound horror and recognition that she knew with absolute certainty, that he'd figured it out. He knew who she was. Victoria Mitchell remained seated, her face pale, clearly calculating how to recover from this. She scribbled something on her scorecard with vicious strikes of her pen. The elderly judge spoke first, his voice thick with emotion. "Young lady, that was, I've been judging these competitions for 30 years, and that was extraordinary. The raw emotion, the technical control, where did you train?" Tiana's voice came out small after all that power. "YouTube, sir. And the hospital stairwell where my mama gets chemo." A collective intake of breath from the audience. Someone said, "Oh my God," loud enough to be heard on stage. Victoria jumped in before anyone could respond. While technically proficient, the performance lacked the polish and refinement we expect from serious competitors. The emotional manipulation was obvious and inappropriate for this venue. She held up her scorecard, a 4 out of 10. Gasps from the audience. Someone booed. The elderly judge looked at Victoria like she'd lost her mind. "Margaret, did we watch the same performance?" He held up his card, a 10. "This child has a gift." All eyes turned to Christopher Hayes. He still hadn't moved, hadn't stopped staring at Tiana with those wet, horrified eyes. His hand trembled as he reached for his scorecard. "Mr. Hayes," the elderly judge prompted gently. "Your score." Christopher's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. When words finally came, they sounded scraped raw. "What?" He stopped, swallowed hard. "What's your name again?" "Tiana Turner, sir." Something broke behind his eyes. He knew that last name. Knew it because 11 years ago, a woman named Diane Turner had loved him enough to let him walk away when things got hard, to never chase him for child support she desperately needed, to raise their daughter alone rather than force him into a fatherhood he clearly didn't want. "Turner," he repeated, the word barely a whisper. "Yes, sir." His hand shook so badly he nearly dropped his scorecard. When he finally held it up, the number was written in an unsteady hand that looked nothing like his usual precise script. 10 out of 10. "Perfect score," he said, his voice breaking. "Absolutely perfect." Victoria made a sound like a wounded animal, but it was drowned out by the eruption of applause. Tiana stood in the lights, looking at her father's devastated face, and felt something fierce and cold settle in her chest. He knew. And there was no running away this time. The stage manager was beside her suddenly, guiding her off stage. "That was incredible, honey. Absolutely incredible. You're through to finals, no question." Tiana walked into the wings on shaking legs. Madison Mitchell stood there, her earlier confidence completely evaporated, staring at Tiana like she was trying to understand how someone so small and poor and unprepared had just blown her polished performance out of the water. Victoria appeared seconds later, her face twisted with an emotion beyond simple anger. It was rage mixed with fear, the look of someone watching their careful plans unravel. "This isn't over," she hissed at Tiana. "You think you can just..." But she was interrupted by a commotion at the judges' table. Christopher Hayes had stood abruptly, his chair scraping back with a harsh sound. He was saying something to the elderly judge, gesturing urgently. Then he was walking, no, nearly running, toward the backstage entrance. Coming for her. Tiana's heart hammered. She wasn't ready for this confrontation. Not yet. Not when Mama didn't even know she was here, didn't know her daughter had just sung her heart out in front of the man who'd destroyed their family. She did what she did best, made herself invisible. Slipped through a side door, down a hallway, out into the bright September afternoon where the fog had finally burned away and the world looked deceptively normal. Behind her, she could hear Christopher's voice calling, "Wait. Please wait." But Tiana was already running, her two big shoes slapping against pavement, her heart full of something that felt like victory and devastation all mixed together. She'd done it. She'd sung. She'd made him see her. Now she just had to figure out what came next. Tiana didn't stop running until she reached the bus stop 6 blocks from the community center, her lungs burning and her legs trembling. She collapsed onto the bench, gasping for air, her mind replaying the look on Christopher Hayes's face over and over like a video stuck on loop. He'd known. The moment she'd said her last name, recognition had crashed over him like a wave. All those tears, that shaking, that wasn't just appreciation for a good performance. That was guilt. That was the past reaching up from where he'd buried it and grabbing him by the throat. Good. The bus arrived 20 minutes later, and Tiana climbed aboard with the last of her emergency dollar, sinking into a seat near the back. She pressed her forehead against the window, watching the city blur past, the nice neighborhoods with their manicured lawns giving way to her neighborhood, where chain-link fences held back nothing and liquor stores outnumbered grocery stores 3-1. Their apartment building came into view, a sagging 4-story structure the color of old teeth. Section 8 housing in a neighborhood the city council kept promising to revitalize, which seemed to mean pushing poor people somewhere else rather than actually helping them. Tiana climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, her shoes still squeaking, her heart still racing. She paused outside apartment 3C, composing herself. Mama was sick, but she wasn't stupid. She'd know something had happened the moment she saw Tiana's face. The door was unlocked. They never had anything worth stealing anyway. Inside, the apartment was dim, curtains drawn against the afternoon light that Mama said made her headaches worse. The TV played quietly, some daytime talk show about people with problems that seemed laughably simple compared to theirs. "Baby girl." Mama's voice came from the bedroom, weak but warm. "That you?" "Yes, Mama." Tiana dropped her backpack by the door and went to the bedroom. Diane Turner lay propped up on pillows, her once beautiful face gaunt and gray, her hair gone from chemotherapy. But her eyes, those warm brown eyes that had been the first thing Christopher Hayes said he'd fallen in love with, still held light. "How was school?" Mama asked, reaching for Tiana's hand. "School. Right." Tiana had told Mama she had a half-day today. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but what was she supposed to say? "Actually, Mama, I skipped school to audition for a talent show in front of the man who abandoned us, and I think I might have broken him a little bit." "It was fine," Tiana said, settling on the edge of the bed. Mama's hand felt paper-thin in hers, all bone and loose skin. "We had a substitute in math." "You eat lunch?" "Yes, Mama." It was a lie. The $5 had been her lunch money, accumulated over weeks. But Mama worried when Tiana didn't eat, and she had enough to worry about. Mama studied her face with those two perceptive eyes. "Something's different about you today." "Nothing's different. Don't lie to your mama, baby girl. You got a light in your eyes I haven't seen in a while. Something good happen." Tiana felt tears prick at her eyes suddenly, unexpectedly. Something good had happened. She'd sung. She'd made it through to finals. She had a chance, a real chance, at $50,000. At saving Mama's life. But telling Mama would mean admitting she'd lied, admitting she'd put herself in a position to be hurt and humiliated, admitting that she'd seen Christopher Hayes and he'd seen her and the wound they'd both been pretending had healed was actually still bleeding. "I just missed you today," Tiana said instead, squeezing Mama's hand gently. "That's all." Mama smiled, but there was sadness behind it. The kind of sadness that came from knowing your child was lying but being too tired to push. "I missed you too, baby. Every day, I miss who we used to be." "Don't talk like that. I'm just being honest." Mama shifted on the pillows, wincing at some internal pain. "The surgery's in 6 weeks, and we don't have the money. The GoFundMe isn't moving. Your Aunt Crystal called today, she's sorry, but she can't help. Lost her job." "We'll figure it out," Tiana said fiercely. "We always do. Sometimes there's nothing to figure out, baby. Sometimes you just have to accept." "No." Tiana's voice came out harder than she intended. "No, I'm not accepting anything. You're going to get that surgery, and you're going to get better, and we're going to be fine." Mama looked at her daughter with a mixture of love and heartbreak. "Oh, Tiana. My strong girl. My fighter. You shouldn't have to be this strong at 10 years old. Well, I am. I know, baby. I know. Mama closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her face. I just wish. I wish your daddy had stayed. I wish you'd had someone else to lean on. I wish I hadn't been so stupid as to love a man who was always going to run. There it was. The wound they both carried but rarely acknowledged. Christopher Hayes, the ghost that haunted their tiny apartment, the absence that shaped everything. You weren't stupid, Tiana said quietly. You loved him. That's not stupid. It is when the person doesn't love you back enough to stay. Tiana thought about Christopher's face, the way he'd looked at her with such horror and recognition. Maybe he did love us. Maybe he was just a coward. Mama opened her eyes, studying Tiana with sudden intensity. That's a very specific thing to say. Why are you thinking about your daddy today? Because I just sang my heart out in front of him and watched him fall apart. Because he gave me a perfect score without knowing he was judging his own daughter. Because in 6 days, I'm going to walk onto that stage again for finals, and this time he'll know exactly who I am, and I'm going to make him watch as I fight for the life he should have helped provide for. No reason, Tiana said. Just something a kid at school said about their dad leaving. Another lie. They were piling up today like unpaid bills. Mama seemed to accept this, or maybe she was just too tired to question further. Well, your daddy made his choice a long time ago. We made ours too. We chose each other. And that's enough. But it wasn't enough. Not when enough meant Mama dying because they couldn't afford to save her. Not when enough meant living in an apartment with peeling paint and cockroaches that came back no matter how much poison you put down. Not when enough meant wearing shoes 2 sizes too big and being looked at like garbage by people like Victoria Mitchell. Tiana wanted more than enough. She wanted everything they'd been denied. Mama, you need to rest, she said, standing up. I'm going to make dinner. We got that pasta left from yesterday. And there's half a can of sauce in the fridge. Half a can of sauce for 2 people. But Tiana would pretend to eat and give most of it to Mama, the way she always did. In the kitchen, while water boiled and cheap pasta cooked, Tiana pulled out the cracked screen phone and searched her name plus talent show. Nothing yet. But the finals were in 6 days, and they'd be live-streamed according to the flyer. The community center had gotten some local TV station to partner with them, hoping to boost visibility. 6 days until she faced Christopher Hayes again. 6 days until she either won $50,000 or watched her last hope disappear. 6 days to figure out if she wanted revenge, redemption, or just to be seen by the man who'd spent 11 years looking away. Outside the kitchen window, the sun was setting over their broken neighborhood, painting everything gold for a few precious minutes before darkness fell. Tiana stirred the pasta and made another promise to herself: whatever happened at finals, Christopher Hayes was going to remember her name for the rest of his life. He'd walked away once. This time, she'd make sure he had nowhere to run. The video hit the internet at 11:47 p.m. that night. Tiana was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to Mama's labored breathing through the thin wall, when her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. Is this you? Below it, a link. She clicked it, and her own face filled the small screen. Someone had recorded her performance, probably on their phone from the sparse audience, and uploaded it to YouTube with the title, 10-Year-Old Destroys Judges with Emotional Performance Rise Up Cover. Tiana's stomach dropped. She watched herself on stage, small and terrified in her thrift store clothes, and then heard her voice fill the space. Even through the phone's tinny speaker, even with the amateur recording quality, the emotion was undeniable. The video had been posted 3 hours ago. It already had 12,000 views. By the time Tiana fell into restless sleep around 2 a.m., it had 89,000. By morning, it had gone viral. Tiana woke to her phone buzzing constantly, texts, notifications, friend requests from people she'd never met. She sat up in bed, disoriented and scared, and opened YouTube with shaking hands. 1.2 million views. Thousands of comments. Who is this child? That voice gave me chills. The way that judge started crying, he felt that. Did y'all see the blonde lady's face? She gave her a 4. That's racism, plain and simple. Someone find this girl and get her a record deal immediately. Wait, she said her mom has cancer and needs surgery. Someone start a GoFundMe. Someone already had. Tiana clicked through shaking hands to find that 3 different people had started fundraising campaigns for the girl from the viral talent show video. The largest one, started by someone named at Justice for Tiana, had already raised $8,000 overnight with a goal of $50,000. Oh my God, Tiana whispered. Oh my God. Baby girl. Mama called from her bedroom. You okay? Tiana jumped up, nearly dropping her phone. She went to Mama's room, her mind racing. How did she explain this? How did she tell Mama that she'd not only lied about school, not only entered a talent show without permission, but had now become an internet sensation? Mama was sitting up in bed, looking more alert than she had in weeks. Her own ancient phone was in her hand, and her face was a mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been pride. Tiana Marie Turner, Mama said slowly. Why am I looking at a video of my daughter singing at a talent show I didn't know she entered? Tiana's throat went dry. Mama, I can explain. Your cousin Keisha just sent this to me. Said it's all over Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. Said my baby girl is famous. Mama's voice cracked. Said people are raising money for my surgery. Tears spilled down Tiana's cheeks. I'm sorry I lied. Mama, I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here and watch you die because we don't have money. I couldn't. Come here, baby. Tiana climbed onto the bed, and Mama wrapped her thin arms around her, holding her while she cried. You beautiful, foolish, brave girl, Mama whispered. What were you thinking, going there by yourself? What if something had happened? What if, her voice broke. What if you'd gotten hurt, and I never even knew where you were? I'm sorry, Tiana sobbed. I'm so sorry. Sorry. Mama pulled back, holding Tiana's face in her hands. Baby girl, I'm not mad you tried to save my life. I'm mad you felt like you had to do it alone. That you couldn't tell me. You would have said no. You would have said it was too dangerous, or I was too young, or we'd find another way even though there is no other way. Mama's eyes filled with tears. You're right. I would have said all that. Because I'm your mama, and my job is to protect you, not the other way around. She wiped Tiana's cheeks. But Lord, baby, that voice. Where did that come from? YouTube. And the hospital stairwell. Mama laughed, a sound Tiana hadn't heard in months. The hospital stairwell? All those times I thought you were in the cafeteria. I was practicing. For this? For this. They sat together for a moment, the phone still buzzing with notifications between them. Mama, Tiana said quietly. There's something else. What? One of the judges. Christopher Hayes. He was there. The color drained from Mama's face. Christopher. Your daddy. Yes, ma'am. He saw you perform. Yes, ma'am. And Mama, Tiana's voice dropped to a whisper. He knew. At the end, when I said my last name, he knew who I was. Mama's hand started shaking. She set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. What did he do? He cried. Gave me a perfect score. Then tried to follow me backstage, but I ran. You ran. Mama's voice was distant, like she was somewhere else entirely. From your daddy. I didn't know what else to do. Mama was quiet for a long time. Then, did he look good? Successful? Yeah. Expensive suit. Designer glasses. Like he's doing real well. Of course he is. Mama's voice had gone hard. He's been doing well for 11 years while we've been doing without. And now he sees you on that stage, singing your heart out because your mama's dying, and he finally feels something. She shook her head. That's not redemption, baby. That's just guilt showing up late. Before Tiana could respond, her phone rang. An unknown number with a 310 area code, Los Angeles, according to the caller ID. Should I answer? Tiana asked. Might as well. This day can't get any stranger. Tiana answered. Hello. Is this Tiana Turner? A woman's voice, professional and excited. Yes, ma'am. Oh my God. Okay. Hi, Tiana. My name is Rebecca Chen, and I'm a talent agent with Stellar Artists Management. I just watched your video, the whole office did, actually, and we'd love to talk about representation. Would you and your parent or guardian be available for a call this week? Tiana looked at Mama, whose eyes had gone wide. Maybe? Can I call you back? Absolutely. Let me give you my direct line. Rebecca rattled off a number. Tiana, I'm going to be honest with you, you're about to get a lot of these calls. A lot of people are going to want to talk to you, offer you things, make promises. Be careful, okay? But also know that what you have, that voice, that emotion, it's special. Really special. Thank you, ma'am. After she hung up, Mama and Tiana stared at each other. A talent agent, Mama said slowly. From Los Angeles. Yes, ma'am. Baby girl, what did you start? Before Tiana could answer, her phone buzzed again. This time it was an email to the address listed on her SoundCloud account, the one where she posted covers as River Kid. The subject line read, Urgent, ethics complaint filed against Tiana Turner. Tiana's blood ran cold as she opened it. Dear Ms. Turner, we regret to inform you that an ethics complaint has been filed regarding your eligibility for the Riverside Community Talent Show Finals. The complaint alleges copyright infringement related to unlicensed cover songs on your SoundCloud account, as well as concerns about lack of proper parental supervision during preliminary rounds. A hearing will be held at 2 p.m. on September 29, tomorrow, at the Riverside Community Arts Center. Your participation in finals is suspended pending resolution. Please bring a parent or guardian. Sincerely, Riverside Arts Council. No, Tiana whispered. No. What is it? Tiana showed Mama the email, and watched her mother's face transform from confusion to understanding to pure fury. Victoria Mitchell, Mama said. That has to be her. She's trying to disqualify you. Finals are in 5 days. If I can't compete, then everything was for nothing. Mama's jaw set in a way Tiana recognized. The way it looked when she was fighting with the insurance company, or arguing with their landlord about the broken heat. No. Absolutely not. Not after you were brave enough to get on that stage. Not after the whole world just saw what you can do. Mama, you're too sick to go to a hearing. I'll crawl there if I have to. Mama reached for her phone. But first, I'm going to make a call I should have made 11 years ago. Who are you calling? Mama's finger hovered over a number she'd kept all these years, buried in her contacts under a name she never spoke aloud. Your father, she said. Because if Christopher Hayes wants to cry over your performance, he can damn well help fight for your right to finish what you started. She pressed call, and somewhere in Los Angeles, Christopher Hayes's phone began to ring. Christopher Hayes was in a conference room at Capitol Records when his phone vibrated with a number he deleted from his contacts years ago but still recognized instantly. The digits were burned into his memory like a brand, a reminder of the life he'd walked away from when things got complicated. Diane Turner. Calling him for the first time in over a decade. He excused himself from the meeting, some producer pitching a mediocre pop star, and stepped into the hallway, his heart hammering. Hello. Christopher. Her voice was weaker than he remembered, thin and strained, but still unmistakably hers. It's Diane. I know. He leaned against the wall, suddenly dizzy. I saw her. Yesterday. At the talent show. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know she'd be there. Would it have mattered if you did? The question hung between them like an accusation. Would he have shown up? Would he have run? He didn't know, and that uncertainty made him feel like the coward he'd always suspected he was. Diane, he stopped. What could he possibly say? I'm sorry was too small for 11 years of absence. I was scared was too honest. I've thought about you both every day would be a lie, because some days he'd successfully pushed them from his mind entirely. Save it, Diane said, and he heard steel beneath the weakness. I'm not calling for apologies. I'm calling because someone filed an ethics complaint to disqualify Tiana from the finals. We have a hearing tomorrow at 2 p.m., and I'm too sick to fight this alone. Christopher's blood ran cold. What? Who filed it? The email doesn't say, but Tiana thinks it's Victoria Mitchell. The coordinator who tried to deny her entry in the first place. Victoria. Christopher remembered her daughter's adequate performance, Victoria's inflated score, the way she'd glared at Tiana like the child's existence was a personal insult. What's the complaint? Copyright infringement. Unlicensed SoundCloud covers. Lack of parental supervision. Diane's voice cracked. Christopher, they're trying to take this away from her. This competition, the prize money, it's for my surgery. I have stage 4 breast cancer. The insurance denied coverage. The surgery costs $50,000, and without it, I have maybe 3 months. The words hit him like physical blows. Stage 4. 3 months. $50,000. His daughter, had walked onto that stage to save her mother's life, and he'd been sitting there clueless, judging her like any other performer. I'll be there, he heard himself say. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. I'll be there. Why? Diane's voice was sharp with suspicion. So you can feel better about yourself? So you can play hero after 11 years of nothing? No. Christopher closed his eyes. Because I owe you both more than I could ever repay. And because that complaint is bullshit. I know copyright law, I deal with it every day. What Tiana did isn't infringement. It's fair use. Educational purposes. No monetization. You're a music executive, not a lawyer. I work with lawyers constantly. And I have one on retainer who owes me a favor. His mind was already racing, planning. Diane, let me help. Please. I know I have no right to ask, but. You're damn right you have no right. She was crying now, he could hear it. But my baby girl sang her heart out in front of strangers to try to save my life, so I guess I can let her coward of a father show up for once. The line went dead. Christopher stood in the hallway of Capitol Records, staring at his phone, and felt the careful architecture of his new life, the life he'd built by pretending his old life didn't exist, begin to crumble. He'd told himself so many stories over the years. That Diane was better off without him. That a child deserved better than a father who wasn't ready. That he'd sent money when he could, though the checks had gotten smaller and less frequent until they stopped entirely. That he'd planned to reach out when he was more established, more stable, more something. All lies. The truth was simpler and more damning. He'd been 23 and terrified when Diane got pregnant. He'd loved her, or thought he had, but when she told him about the baby, all he could see was his dreams disappearing. The music industry career he'd just started building. The freedom to take risks and chase opportunities. The life that suddenly felt like it was closing in on him like a cage. So he'd run. Made promises he never kept. Sent checks that couldn't feed a child for a week. Eventually stopped pretending he was going to be part of their lives. And Diane had let him go. Never called. Never begged. Never showed up at his new apartment or his office. She'd just let him be the coward he'd chosen to be. Until now. Until their daughter had forced both of them out of their corners. Christopher pulled up his contacts and called his lawyer. Richard? I need you to clear your schedule tomorrow afternoon. I've got a situation. What kind of situation? The kind where I try to become slightly less of a terrible person. That evening, Christopher caught a flight from LAX to Riverside. He checked into a hotel near the community center and spent hours researching copyright law, fair use doctrine, and talent show regulations. He reviewed Tiana's SoundCloud page, River Kid, she called herself, and listened to every cover she'd posted. She was good. Better than good. Even through phone recordings and amateur equipment, her talent was undeniable. How many nights had she spent in that hospital stairwell, teaching herself to sing while her mother fought cancer alone? While he'd been in LA signing artists and going to industry parties and living the life he'd chosen over them. His phone buzzed constantly with notifications. The video of Tiana's performance had exploded, over 5 million views now. Entertainment news sites were picking it up. Celebrity musicians were sharing it with captions like, "Find this girl," and "The next Whitney." And everywhere, in the comments and articles, people were asking, where are her parents? Who's supporting this child? Christopher wanted to put his fist through the hotel room wall. At midnight, he got a text from an unknown number, "This is Tiana. My mama gave me your number. I don't want your help tomorrow. I don't want anything from you. But my mama's too sick to fight, so I guess you'll be there. Just stay away from me. You don't get to be my father now just because it's convenient." He stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "I understand. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm going to help anyway, because it's the bare minimum of what I should have been doing for 11 years. After tomorrow, if you never want to see me again, I'll respect that." The response came immediately, "You respected my mama's wishes not to contact us for over a decade. I'm sure you'll manage just fine." Christopher set his phone down and buried his face in his hands. At 7 a.m. the next morning, he was back at the community center, walking through the doors he'd exited just 2 days ago. The building looked different in morning light, smaller, shabbier, the kind of place community organizations used because the rent was cheap. The kind of place his daughter had come to, alone, desperate, and been turned away. He found the administrative office on the second floor. Victoria Mitchell was already there, talking to a man in a cheap suit who had "counsel attorney" written all over him. "Mr. Hayes," Victoria said, her tone falsely pleasant. "I didn't expect to see you here this early. The hearing isn't until 2 p.m. "I know." Christopher walked past her into the office. "I'm here to review the complaint. As a judge on the panel, I have that right. This is an ethics matter. It doesn't concern the judging panel. A complaint that could disqualify a contestant I scored. It absolutely concerns me." He turned to the attorney. "I'd like to see the documentation. All of it." The man hesitated, looking at Victoria. "Now," Christopher said, letting his voice carry the weight of every boardroom negotiation he'd ever won. "Or I can call the head of the Arts Council and explain why one of their coordinators is trying to disqualify a viral sensation 2 days before finals. I'm sure the publicity would be great for your organization." Victoria's face went pale. The attorney slid a folder across the desk. Christopher opened it and began to read, his jaw tightening with every word. This wasn't just an ethics complaint. This was a hit job. And Christopher Hayes was about to make sure it failed. The hearing room was smaller than Christopher expected, just a cramped office with a folding table and mismatched chairs that squeaked against linoleum floors. Victoria Mitchell sat on one side with her attorney, looking confident in a navy suit that probably cost more than Diane's monthly disability check. On the other side, 3 empty chairs waited. At 1:55 p.m., the door opened. Diane Turner walked in, and Christopher's breath caught in his throat. She'd been beautiful 11 years ago, warm brown eyes, an easy smile, curves that had made him forget every sensible thought in his head. Now she was gaunt, her skin carrying a grayish tint that spoke of serious illness. A colorful scarf covered her head where chemotherapy had stolen her hair. She moved slowly, carefully, like every step cost her something precious. But her eyes, those eyes still held fire. Behind her, Tiana walked with her head high, wearing the same purple, future star, shirt from the audition. Her hand gripped her mother's arm, supporting her, this tiny child holding up the woman who'd raised her alone. Christopher stood automatically, and both of them froze when they saw him. Diane. His voice came out rough. You look dying. She cut him off. Yes, Christopher. I look like I'm dying. Because I am. Tiana's eyes were hard as stones. You said you'd help with the hearing. You didn't say you'd be here waiting like we're some kind of reunion. I got here early to review the complaint, Christopher said. And I need you both to know something before we start. We don't need to know anything from you, Tiana said. Tiana, Diane put a hand on her daughter's shoulder. No, Mama. He doesn't get to. The door opened again, and a woman in a gray suit entered, Patricia Gaines, Arts Council Director. She looked uncomfortable as she took her seat at the head of the table. Let's begin, Patricia said. This hearing concerns an ethics complaint filed against contestant Tiana Turner. Ms. Mitchell, you filed the complaint. Please state your concerns. Victoria sat forward, her expression arranged in concern that didn't reach her eyes. Director Gaines, this is simply about maintaining the integrity of our competition. Ms. Turner posted multiple copyrighted covers on her SoundCloud account without proper licensing. As you know, copyright infringement is a serious matter. Additionally, she entered the preliminary round without parental supervision or consent, which violates our safety protocols for minor contestants. Those are serious allegations, Patricia said. She turned to Diane. Ms. Turner, did you give your daughter permission to enter this competition? Diane's hand tightened on Tiana's. No, ma'am. She didn't tell me she was entering. But. So the child competed without parental consent, Victoria interrupted. Which is exactly what the rules prohibit. If I may, Christopher said. Everyone turned to look at him. Mr. Hayes, you're a judge, not a party to this hearing, Patricia said. I'm also an A&R executive who deals with copyright law daily. And he looked at Tiana, whose eyes were blazing with warning. I'm someone who wants to make sure this hearing is based on facts, not discrimination. Discrimination? Victoria's voice went shrill. How dare you? Let him speak, Patricia said. Christopher pulled out a folder he'd prepared. First, the copyright claim. Ms. Mitchell alleges Tiana posted unlicensed covers. But fair use doctrine specifically protects educational and non-commercial use. Tiana's SoundCloud account has no monetization. No ads. No paid subscriptions. She's a child learning to sing by covering songs, the same thing millions of kids do on YouTube, TikTok, and other platforms every day. If this were copyright infringement, half the internet would be liable. He slid documents across the table. I spoke with an intellectual property attorney this morning. He confirmed that what Tiana did falls squarely under fair use. Furthermore, the only reason this is being raised now is because someone, he looked directly at Victoria, searched for reasons to disqualify her after her performance went viral. Victoria's face flushed. That's absurd. I'm protecting the competition's integrity. By targeting a black child from Section 8 housing. Christopher's voice was cold. A child you tried to deny entry to in the first place. A child whose application you threw in a puddle. The room went silent. I have witnesses, Christopher continued. Other parents who saw how you treated Tiana at registration. How you told her she wasn't appropriate for this competition. How you used hand sanitizer after touching her application, as if poverty was contagious. Victoria shot to her feet. This is outrageous. I never. You did, said a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. A young woman stood there holding a phone, one of the production assistants from the preliminary rounds. I recorded it, she said, walking into the room. The whole interaction at registration. I thought it was wrong, what Ms. Mitchell did, but I didn't know who to tell. Then I saw the video go viral, and I knew I had to come forward. She placed her phone on the table and pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the room. This isn't appropriate for someone like you. I need performers who won't embarrass this organization. Every child here has practiced. They've earned their spot. They don't need some. The recording cut off, but the implication was clear. Patricia Gaines's face had gone carefully blank, the expression of someone making mental calculations about lawsuits and publicity nightmares. Ms. Mitchell, Patricia said slowly, I think we need to discuss your conduct separately. For now, let's address the complaint itself. She turned to Christopher. You've addressed the copyright issue. What about parental consent? Tiana's mother is here now, giving retroactive consent, Christopher said. The rules don't specify that consent must be obtained before preliminaries, only that minors must be supervised by a guardian. Which Tiana will be, going forward. Because her mother is dying and her father abandoned her, Tiana said suddenly, her voice cutting through the procedural language like a knife. So she had to do it alone. She had to save her mama alone because nobody else was going to help. The room went silent again. Tiana stood up, facing Victoria directly. You looked at me like I was trash. Like I didn't deserve to be there because I'm poor and black and my shoes don't fit right. But I can sing. I can sing better than your daughter, better than anyone else in that audition room, and you knew it. That's why you're trying to disqualify me now, not because of copyright or rules, but because you can't stand that someone like me might win. Tiana, Diane tried to pull her back down, but Tiana wasn't finished. My mama has 3 months to live without surgery. 3 months. And I'm 10 years old, and I'm trying to save her life the only way I know how. So you can sit there in your expensive suit and talk about rules and integrity, but we both know what this really is. This is you trying to keep me in my place. Victoria's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Patricia cleared her throat. I've heard enough. Ms. Mitchell, your complaint is denied. The copyright claim has no merit, and the parental consent issue is resolved. Tiana Turner will compete in finals as scheduled. She paused. Additionally, Ms. Mitchell, you and I will be meeting with HR tomorrow morning. Your conduct toward a minor contestant is deeply troubling. Victoria's face went from flushed to white. Director Gaines, Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Patricia's tone left no room for argument. Victoria gathered her things with shaking hands and left without looking at anyone. Patricia turned to Tiana. Young lady, I owe you an apology on behalf of this organization. What happened at registration should never have occurred. Your talent is extraordinary, and you absolutely deserve your place in finals. Thank you, ma'am, Tiana said quietly. Patricia left, and suddenly it was just the three of them, Christopher, Diane, and Tiana, in the small office, 11 years of silence pressing down like a physical weight. Well, Diane said finally. Thank you for your help, Christopher. We should go. Wait. Christopher's voice cracked. Please. Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. You're asking for 5 minutes. Tiana's laugh was bitter. You took 11 years. I know. And I can never get that time back. I can never undo leaving. But I'm here now, and I want to." He stopped. What did he want? Forgiveness? He didn't deserve it. A relationship? He hadn't earned it. "I want to help. The surgery. Let me pay for it." "No," Diane said immediately. "Diane, please." "I said no, Christopher. I've managed for 11 years without you. I can manage now. By letting your 10-year-old daughter try to win $50,000 in a talent show." His voice rose despite himself. "By making her carry this burden alone." "She's not alone," Diane said. "She has me." "For how long?" The words came out crueler than he intended. "You said 3 months. What happens after that? Who takes care of her then?" The silence that followed was devastating. Tiana's voice, when it came, was small and broken. "Nobody. That's who. Because you didn't want me then, and you don't get to want me now just because Mama's dying." She turned and walked out of the room. Diane started to follow, but Christopher caught her arm gently. "I have a check. Already written. 52,000, enough for the surgery and recovery costs. Please. Let me do this one thing." Diane looked at him with exhausted eyes. "Money doesn't erase abandonment, Christopher. I know. But maybe it saves a life. Isn't that worth putting your pride aside?" "My pride?" Her voice shook. "You think this is about pride? This is about protecting my daughter from a man who might disappear again the moment things get difficult." "I won't." "You already did." She pulled away. "Finals are in 4 days. Come watch if you want. Judge fairly. But after that? Stay away from us. We've survived without you this long. We'll keep surviving." She walked out, leaving Christopher alone in the empty office, holding a check that could save a life but couldn't repair what he'd broken. Through the window, he watched Diane and Tiana walk to the bus stop, Tiana supporting her mother, 2 figures against the fading afternoon light. And for the first time in 11 years, Christopher Hayes let himself feel the full weight of what he'd lost. Finals night arrived with the weight of everything that had come before. The Riverside Community Arts Center was packed, every seat filled, people standing in the aisles, news cameras positioned at strategic angles. What had started as a small community talent show had transformed into something else entirely. The viral video had brought national attention. Entertainment reporters. Record label scouts. And thousands of viewers tuning into the live stream. Backstage, Tiana stood in front of a cracked mirror, adjusting the dress someone had sent her, a local boutique owner who'd seen the video and wanted to help. It was simple but beautiful, deep purple like her old shirt, with fabric that actually fit instead of hanging loose or pulling tight. "You look like a star, baby girl," Mama said from the chair where she sat, too weak to stand for long. She'd insisted on coming despite the doctor's warnings, despite the pain that made her wince with every breath. "I feel like I'm going to throw up," Tiana admitted. "That's how you know it matters." Mama reached for her hand. "Whatever happens tonight, I'm proud of you. You know that, right?" "I know, Mama. I mean it. Win or lose, you already did the impossible. You made them see you. Made them listen. That's worth more than any prize money." But Tiana needed the prize money. The GoFundMe had raised almost $30,000, incredible, overwhelming, a miracle in itself, but it wasn't enough. They needed $50,000 for the surgery. And they needed it in 2 weeks. The stage manager knocked on the door. "Tiana? You're third up. 5 minutes." Tiana's stomach clenched. She followed Mama out to the wings, helping her into a special chair the production crew had set up. From here, they could see the stage and the judges' table. Christopher Hayes sat in his designated spot, wearing a different expensive suit but the same haunted expression he'd worn since the hearing. He tried to approach them twice, once at the community center 2 days ago, once outside their apartment building yesterday. Both times, Tiana had refused to speak to him. The check he'd offered sat in Mama's purse, still uncashed. They'd argued about it for hours. "It's blood money," Tiana had said. "It's survival," Mama had countered. But in the end, neither of them could bring themselves to deposit it. Not yet. The first two performers were excellent, a 17-year-old with a guitar who brought the audience to tears, a dance crew that had clearly trained for years. The bar was high. But Tiana wasn't nervous about the competition. She was nervous about what came after. Next up, the host announced, performing "Stand Up" by Cynthia Erivo, "Please welcome 10-year-old Tiana Turner." The audience erupted before she even stepped on stage. People were on their feet, phones raised, chanting her name like she'd already won. Tiana walked into the lights, and the noise faded to nothing. This was different from preliminaries. This time, she knew her father was watching. This time, millions of people were streaming live. This time, everything was on the line. The music started, powerful, dramatic, the kind of song that demanded everything you had. Tiana gave it everything. She sang about standing up when the world pushed you down. About fighting when every odd was stacked against you. About refusing to be invisible, refusing to be silenced, refusing to give up even when giving up would be so much easier. She sang for Mama, fighting cancer with the same fierce determination Tiana had inherited. She sang for every kid in Section 8 housing who'd been told they didn't belong in spaces like this. She sang for the father who was finally watching, finally listening, 11 years too late but here nonetheless. Her voice filled every corner of the auditorium, raw and powerful and utterly fearless. She hit notes that shouldn't have been possible for a 10-year-old, poured emotion into every word until the song became something bigger than performance, it became testimony. When the final note faded, the silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then the auditorium exploded. People weren't just applauding. They were screaming, crying, throwing flowers onto the stage. The other contestants backstage were cheering. The camera operators were wiping their eyes. Even the elderly judge who'd seen 30 years of talent shows was openly sobbing. And Christopher Hayes. Christopher Hayes had his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking, completely undone. The host could barely speak over the noise. "Judges, your scores." Victoria Mitchell's replacement, a music teacher brought in after Victoria's resignation, held up a 10 without hesitation. The elderly judge held up a 10, his hands trembling. Christopher Hayes stood up. The audience quieted, waiting. He held up his scorecard, a 10. Then he did something no one expected. He stepped away from the judge's table and walked onto the stage. "What are you doing?" the host asked, confused. Christopher ignored him. He walked straight to Tiana, who stood frozen, unsure whether to run or stay. "Tiana," he said, his voice amplified by his lapel mic, broadcast to everyone in the auditorium and everyone watching online. "I need to say something. Publicly. So everyone knows." "Don't," Tiana whispered. But he was already speaking. "My name is Christopher Hayes. And I'm Tiana's father." Gasps rippled through the audience. 11 years ago, I walked away from her and her mother. I was young and scared and selfish, and I convinced myself they'd be better off without me. I sent child support a few times, then stopped. Changed my number. Built a new life. Pretended they didn't exist. His voice cracked. And then 3 days ago, a little girl walked onto this stage to try to save her mother's life, and I sat at that table and judged her performance without knowing I was judging my own daughter. My daughter, who I abandoned. Who I should have been supporting all along. Who shouldn't have to win a competition to afford her mother's cancer surgery. The audience was silent now, transfixed. "I can't undo 11 years, Christopher continued. I can't take back the birthdays I missed, the school plays, the nights she probably cried herself to sleep wondering why her daddy didn't want her. But I can do this. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. This is a cashier's check for $52,000. Enough for the surgery and recovery. I'm giving it to Diane Turner right now, on this stage, in front of all these witnesses, so I can't run away again. So I have to face what I did. He walked to the wings where Mama sat, and placed the envelope in her hands. Mama stared at it, tears streaming down her face. Christopher turned back to the audience. I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. I'm just trying to do one thing right after years of doing everything wrong. He walked off the stage, back to the judge's table, and sat down without looking at anyone. The host was speechless. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. Tiana stood in the lights, looking at her mother, who was holding the check like it might disappear. The surgery's paid for, baby girl, Mama called out. You did it. You saved me. Tiana felt something break open in her chest, relief and rage and grief all mixed together. She'd done what she set out to do. Mama would live. But the cost had been everything, her privacy, her anonymity, her childhood. And the man who should have been there all along had only shown up when the whole world was watching. The competition continued. 2 more performers after Tiana, both excellent, both irrelevant. When the final scores were tallied, Tiana Turner won by unanimous decision. $50,000. Plus the check Christopher had given. Plus the GoFundMe money. More than enough for surgery, recovery, and a little breathing room afterward. She stood on stage accepting the oversized check, cameras flashing, people cheering, and felt nothing but exhaustion. The host tried to interview her. Tiana, how does it feel? I don't know, she said honestly. Ask me after my mama's surgery. Ask me when I know she's going to live. In the weeks that followed, Diane Turner got her surgery. The doctors removed the tumors, started aggressive treatment, and gave her odds that had improved from 10% to 70%. Not guaranteed, but possible. Hope where there had been none. Tiana signed with Rebecca Chen's talent agency. Turned down a dozen record deals to wait for the right one. Started vocal lessons with a coach who cried during their first session. And Christopher Hayes stayed. Not in their lives, Tiana had made it clear he wasn't welcome there, not yet, maybe not ever. But nearby. Paying for Mama's treatment. Setting up a trust fund for Tiana's future. Showing up at her first professional recording session not because she'd invited him, but because he promised himself he'd never miss another important moment. Tiana let him stay on the periphery. Didn't call him dad. Didn't forgive him. But didn't completely shut him out either. Because maybe, she thought, redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about showing up for the future, even when you didn't deserve to be there. 6 months later, Tiana released her first single, an original song about mothers and daughters and survival. It went platinum. 1 year later, Diane Turner's cancer was in remission. Not cured, but controlled. Enough for her to dance at Tiana's first major concert. Enough to see her daughter live the dreams they'd once thought impossible. And 11 years after walking away, Christopher Hayes sat in the audience at that concert, watching his daughter shine, and finally understood what he'd almost lost forever. The story could have ended differently. The talent show judge could have remained anonymous. The surgery could have come too late. Tiana could have been disqualified. Her voice could have gone unheard. But sometimes, when you're brave enough to step into the light and demand to be seen, the world has no choice but to listen. If someone who hurt you deeply showed up years later wanting to help, would you let them? Can redemption erase abandonment, or does real healing require something else entirely? Share your thoughts below, because forgiveness isn't simple, and neither are the choices we make when faced with people from our past.
Wow, we made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, the best way to support me is super simple. Just hit like and subscribe. Takes 1 second but helps me create more stories for you. Speaking of which, I've got another one ready to go. Click the next video on your screen now and let's continue. See you there.